Hey guys, tonight we step into the damp, smoke-filled air of a medieval peasant's hut. The ceiling is so low that if you stretch, you'll brush it with your fingertips. You wake not on a mattress, not even on a proper bed, but on a pile of straw that smells faintly of mold and the chickens that sometimes sleep there with you. The hut is dark, the only light seeping through cracks in the wooden slats and the hole in the roof that doubles as a chimney. And before you even sit up, you realize something important. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, because you might fall asleep during this story, and share only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, turn off the lights and lie down on your chair or bed, and let's begin tonight's journey together. Your eyes adjust slowly to the gloom. The air is thick with smoke from a half-dead fire that refuses to stay lit. You cough quietly, your chest already sore from the constant inhaling of soot. There's no chimney in the modern sense, just a hole in the roof that allows half the smoke to escape and the other half to linger like a ghost in the rafters. And yes, rafters is generous, more like crooked beams, darkened from years of smoke and patched with whatever wood could be scavenged. Beside you, there might be a spouse, or children, or no one at all. Privacy in this world doesn't really exist. The entire family, and maybe even a pig or a goat, sleeps together in this single room, which is both bedroom and kitchen. If you were lucky, you curled up near the embers last night, your feet numb but not frozen. If unlucky, you woke to find frost on your blanket, or no blanket at all. The smell is unmistakable. Damp earth, animal dung, and your own unwashed body. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants actually bathed less often than people in later centuries. But right now, you smell like someone who hasn't seen a tub of warm water in months. If you want a fun fact, soap exists, but it's harsh lye made from ash and animal fat. Rub it too much on your skin, and you'll feel rawer than a tomato after sunburn. You shift on the straw, and something sharp jabs your leg. It's a piece of reed or maybe a flea bite. You scratch absent-mindedly, but the itch never really leaves. You're not alone in here. The straw is alive with tiny, crawling creatures. One joke for you. If you had to choose between a feather pillow full of goose down or this straw heap full of fleas, well, congratulations. You've already got the flea package, and it's not refundable. As you stand, your head nearly bumps the rafters. You're already dizzy from hunger. Breakfast won't come until later, and it won't be much. Maybe a crust of bread, maybe watered-down ale. The night was restless because your neighbor's baby cried for hours, echoing through the thin walls. There's no insulation here. Sound travels like gossip in a high school hallway. You rub your hands together, rough and cracked from yesterday's labor. Calluses form quickly when all you do is work the fields, carry water, chop wood, or mend tools. And your nails? Let's just say you wouldn't survive a modern manicure shop. The hut itself is nothing glamorous. Walls of wattle and daub, sticks woven together and covered with a mixture of clay, mud, and, yes, manure. It keeps out some wind, but not the damp chill. Every winter, you smear more on, like reapplying sunscreen. Only instead of coconut-scented lotion, it's cow dung. Historians call it practical. You call it disgusting but necessary. You glance at the single window. It isn't glass. Glass is for cathedrals or noble homes. Your window is a small opening covered by a shutter or a thin sheet of animal horn, letting in a murky yellow light. When it rains, water drips inside. When it's windy, the shutter bangs open and you curse the cold. Your stomach growls. You think back to last night's supper. If you were lucky, a thin vegetable pottage, cabbage, onions, maybe a carrot, maybe some beans if you had them. Meat is rare, often only eaten at festivals or feasts. A pig might be slaughtered once a year, but most days you live on bread, gruel, and ale. It's said the medieval peasant consumed more bread than any modern bakery can imagine producing. Imagine a diet so heavy in carbs that even today's gym trainers would faint at the thought. Another quirky tidbit: many peasants actually brewed their own ale at home. Weak stuff with just enough alcohol to purify the water. Children drank it too, because the alternative, plain water, was often dangerous. So yes, your 6-year-old is sipping beer at breakfast. But don't worry, it's more like liquid bread than a modern pint. The fire sputters, reminding you that fuel is scarce. You collect wood when you can, but much of the land belongs to the Lord, and taking too much can mean punishment. Sometimes, dried animal dung fills the role of firewood. Romantic, isn't it? Picture yourself curling up by the hearth, sipping ale, while cow dung slowly burns beside you. You could almost start a medieval lifestyle brand: rustic hearth, candles, with a hint of manure. The sounds outside are faint but constant: a rooster crowing, dogs barking, and the clatter of buckets at the village well. Soon, you'll have to head out too. Life in the Middle Ages doesn't pause for your complaints. Yet, before you step out, you look around your hut one more time. The small chest in the corner contains everything you own. Maybe a second tunic. Maybe a knife. Maybe a wooden spoon. Wealth is measured in survival, not luxury. You can't afford to lose anything, not even a spoon. In fact, most peasants eat from a communal pot, dipping in with their hands or with a chunk of bread. Your personal spoon is almost like a prized possession. As you open the door, your eyes sting from the sudden light. The damp earth greets you, cold and unwelcoming. You pull your rough woolen cloak tighter, though it scratches your neck. Wool is your only real option. Linen, if you're lucky. Silk? Forget it. You'll never even touch silk in your lifetime. And so your day begins, just as it ended, with discomfort, hunger, and exhaustion already weighing you down. One day in this hut, and you already understand. This isn't just difficult, it's survival. The cold hits you like a bucket of water the moment you step outside. The damp air clings to your skin, and you instantly regret leaving the smoky hut. The sun hasn't risen fully yet, just a pale smear of gray in the sky, but the village is stirring. Smoke curls from a few crooked chimneys, thin and weak. You tug the rough cloak closer around you, though it offers about as much warmth as a modern paper towel. Your feet sink slightly into the mud, slick from last night's rain. There's no paved street here, just dirt paths carved by centuries of trudging feet. Every villager's hut is clustered around the same winding lane, their walls leaning slightly as though conspiring to topple onto each other. The ground smells of manure, because, yes, animals wander freely. Pigs snuffle near the doorways, chickens flap their wings in irritation, and a cow bellows impatiently for milking. You shiver. This isn't the kind of chill that goes away with a sweater or a hot coffee. It's a deep, marrow-level cold that burrows into your bones. Remember, medieval houses had no insulation, no central heating, and definitely no double-paned windows. Fires provided warmth only if you sat practically on top of them. Step away, and you're shivering again. Historians still argue whether the Little Ice Age had fully taken hold by the later Middle Ages. But whether or not the climate was colder, you're freezing. A neighbor passes by with a bundle of sticks strapped to her back. She's shorter than you expect, bent slightly from years of labor, her hands red and cracked. She nods, says something about the day's work, and trudges on. There's no small talk about sports, no weekend plans, no witty memes shared over coffee. Medieval conversation is practical. Weather, crops, health. Occasionally, a scandal. But mostly, it's survival chatter. Your stomach growls again. You consider the prospect of breakfast. The problem is, it's not waiting for you in the fridge. There's no fridge, no pantry stocked with cereal and milk. What you might have is bread baked 2 days ago, already hard enough to qualify as a weapon. If you soften it in ale, you can chew it without cracking a tooth. And yes, everyone drinks ale first thing in the morning. Water isn't safe. Imagine stumbling to school or work with a buzz, but instead of explaining it away as too much last night, it's just breakfast. A little quirky tidbit. Sometimes peasants added herbs or even twigs to their weak ale. Not for taste, but because they thought it gave strength. In reality, it probably just made it taste like someone stirred it with a broom. But hey, who are we to judge? Modern energy drinks aren't exactly health elixirs either. The rooster crows again, louder this time, as if mocking you for wanting to crawl back under your straw. Too bad, there's no such thing as a day off. Your survival depends on relentless work. Even on religious holidays, you're expected to attend church, not snooze under the covers. And let's be honest, those church pews aren't exactly ergonomic. The air smells of wood smoke, manure, and something faintly sour. You can't place it, but it's everywhere. Your nose runs, your fingers sting. You wipe them on your tunic, which is coarse and itchy against your skin. The wool is undyed, a dull brownish gray, because fancy colors require expensive dyes. You dream of bright blue or red, but that's a fantasy. Even black requires extra processing, so peasants wear what looks like the medieval version of earth tones. Fashion Week. This is not. A dog barks at your feet, scrappy and thin. Dogs here aren't pampered pets. They're half wild, scavengers as much as guardians. They'll eat scraps, fight wolves, and sometimes bite children. You don't dare reach down to pet this one unless you want a handful of teeth. You shuffle toward the village well. Your bucket clunks against your leg as you walk, heavy even before it's filled. Water duty isn't glamorous, but without it, there's no cooking, no cleaning, no survival. You wait your turn behind two women, gossiping in hushed tones about the reeve, the Lord's steward. Apparently, he took more grain than usual this week. That means less bread, more hunger. The women whisper that perhaps he's hoarding it, perhaps he's greedy. But careful, gossip can travel, and punishment is no joke. The wind gusts suddenly, and you're reminded that this cloak isn't lined, nor is your tunic. Layers? Only if you own them. Most peasants have 2 sets of clothes at most, and one is likely patched so many times it looks like a quilt. And you're already shivering through yours. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly as malnourished as often depicted. But let's be real. Without modern nutrition, vitamins, or even reliable harvests, your diet is limited. You're cold because you lack calories. Bread fills your belly but doesn't fuel your body. You want warmth, but warmth requires fat. And fat comes from meat, dairy, or oil you rarely see. Another little joke to lighten the mood. Modern survival guides tell you to dress in layers. Congratulations, you're wearing all your layers. That's it. Want more? Too bad. You'll have to trade your only spoon for a scrap of fabric, and nobody's giving that up. By now, your breath clouds the air as you haul the bucket upward, muscles straining. You feel every tug in your shoulders, every ache in your spine. The water sloshes, threatening to spill before you've even made it back to the hut. You grit your teeth. This is life, endless, repetitive, and exhausting. The bell in the distance tolls softly, marking the hour. The church dominates the village skyline, its stone tower rising above the wooden huts. You look at it with mixed feelings. Faith offers comfort, but it also dictates your schedule. The bell tells you when to rise, when to work, when to pray. And while you mutter a quick blessing, you're mostly praying you don't freeze before noon. The path back to your hut feels longer with the heavy bucket swinging at your side. Your fingers are stiff, your knuckles red. You try not to spill, but some water sloshes anyway, soaking your leg. Now you're wet, and wet means colder. Lovely. When you finally set the bucket down inside, you feel an odd pride. You did it. You survived your first task of the morning. And yet, your day has only just begun, and you're already tired, shivering, and half hungry. The Middle Ages doesn't care. The cold remains, and so does your work. Breakfast arrives, but don't get excited. It's not a feast. You shuffle back inside, numb fingers fumbling with the rough wooden cup on the table. If you can even call it a table, it's a wobbly plank nailed together, tilting slightly because one leg is shorter than the others. On it rests your meal, a chunk of yesterday's bread, stale and hard enough to chip a tooth, and a mug of weak ale that smells faintly sour. Congratulations! You're about to enjoy the peasant version of a continental breakfast. Minus the croissant, minus the fruit, minus everything except disappointment. You pick up the bread, gnaw on the edge, and immediately regret it. The crust is like stone. To make it chewable, you dunk it in the ale. This softens it just enough to save your teeth. It doesn't taste good. It tastes like wet bread. But it fills your stomach, at least for now. Historians still argue whether peasants ate more rye, barley, or wheat depending on the region. But one thing is clear. Bread ruled the medieval table. If there's no bread, there's panic. Bread riots happened centuries later in cities, but even now, the loss of bread feels like a death sentence. You sip the ale carefully. Don't picture a frothy pub pint. It's closer to murky, lukewarm porridge water, weak in alcohol, strong in calories, and safer than water. Even children drink it without question. And yes, that means you're technically day drinking. Think of it as your medieval mimosa, only without the brunch menu. The fire sputters in the hearth, throwing off just enough warmth to thaw your fingertips. You sit near it, huddling close, but you know fuel is precious. Too much wood burned now means none later. So the flames shrink, leaving smoke more than heat. The smoke creeps into your eyes, stinging until they water. You blink rapidly, wiping your face with a scratchy sleeve. You glance at the family around you. If you're lucky, there's something extra. Maybe a sliver of cheese. Maybe a thin onion slice. But usually, it's bread and ale. And bread again at noon. And bread again at night. A fun little fact. A medieval peasant could eat up to 3 pounds of bread per day. Imagine carrying that around in your stomach. Forget carb loading for a marathon. You're carb loading for survival, a quirky tidbit. Sometimes bread wasn't just food, it doubled as a plate. Wealthier folk used trenchers, thick slices of stale bread used to hold stew. After the meal, the bread plate was either eaten, tossed to the dogs, or given to the poor. So yes, your dish was also dinner. Eco-friendly, sure, but probably crawling with bacteria. As you chew the bread, you hear a neighbor knock on the doorframe. He sticks his head in, mutters about the fields, and leaves. No good morning, no chit-chat, just practical reminders of the work ahead. You sigh. Breakfast is over, and you're not full. You never really are. Hunger is like a shadow here. It follows you everywhere, nibbling at your energy. Historians still argue whether peasants were truly starving all the time or just underfed compared to today. But you don't need a debate. Your hollow stomach says enough. Malnutrition is common. You crave meat, but animals are too valuable alive. Milk, eggs, and wool are worth more than slaughter. So you dream of bacon. But dream is all it is. One joke for you. Modern dietitians would probably look at your breakfast and say, cut back on carbs, add protein, balance with greens. You'd laugh if you weren't choking on dry crust. Protein? Greens? Those are festival luxuries. You've got bread. Be grateful. The sound of a child crying echoes through the hut next door. You hear the mother scolding softly, then offering the same kind of crust you just ate. It doesn't quiet the hunger, only the noise. Life here is loud with the voices of children, animals, and chores, but quiet with joy. You wash the last bite down with ale, wipe your mouth, and set the cup aside. There's no cutlery except maybe a spoon. Forks? Those aren't on your horizon yet. Even knives are valuable tools, often shared among family members. Most eating is done with hands or bread as scoops. Germs are plentiful, but nobody knows what they are. If you get sick, it's God's will. Or maybe a curse. The fire dies almost completely, and the chill returns, settling into your bones like an unwelcome guest. You stand, stretching your stiff back, already weary though the day has barely begun. Breakfast was no relief, only a reminder that you must keep going, keep working, or starve. And as you glance at the crumbs left on the table, you already dread the moment when your stomach growls again, because it always does. You step back outside after your meager breakfast, and the air bites sharper than before. The gray sky has lifted slightly, revealing a dull winter sun that does little more than mock you. Today is not a holiday, not a feast day, not a day of rest. Today is the same as nearly every day: work in the fields. And if you thought fields meant neatly plowed rows and golden wheat swaying like something out of a postcard, you're in for disappointment. This is mud, sweat, and calluses. The ground squelches beneath your worn shoes, if you even have shoes. Many peasants worked barefoot in warmer months, their feet hardened like leather. You glance at your toes and wonder if you'll still feel them by nightfall. The Lord's land stretches ahead, dotted with patches of crops that seem endless when you're the one forced to tend them. You grab a wooden hoe, its handle splintering in places, the blade dulled from overuse. There's no shiny tractor waiting, no machine to plow the earth for you. It's your back, your shoulders, your sweat. You press the blade into the ground and pull, feeling resistance in every muscle. Your palms burn, blisters threatening with each stroke. And this isn't an hour-long workout. It's sunrise to sunset. Forget leg day at the gym. This is leg, arm, and soul day every day. Historians still argue whether peasants were truly tied to the land without escape, or if some could occasionally move for better opportunities. But in this moment, you don't feel like you have options. You're locked in, bound by obligation to the Lord who owns this soil and everything you pull from it. You owe him part of your harvest, part of your labor, part of your very life. The work is endless. You clear stones, pull weeds, sow seeds, or harvest, depending on the season. In summer, the sun bakes you. In winter, frost gnaws at your hands. Right now, the earth is damp, clinging to your tool with each scrape. You wipe sweat from your brow with a dirty sleeve, even though the air is cold. The effort makes your body steam, your breath coming out in visible puffs. Beside you, other villagers labor too. Men, women, even children. No one escapes the fields. Children as young as 7 are expected to help with simple tasks. There's no concept of childhood as you know it. Childhood is short, harsh, and filled with work. You glance at a boy hauling water with arms too thin for the task, and you realize he's already older than his years. The rhythm of the work is punctuated by small, sharp pains. A thorn scratching your hand, a blister forming, your lower back spasming when you bend too quickly. You grit your teeth. Rest is rare. You steal a few moments to straighten up, stretch, and glance at the horizon. But even then, the Reeve, the Lord's steward, keeps watch. He knows if you slack off, and punishment is always an option. One quirky tidbit: some peasants believe certain charms could help crops grow. A whispered prayer, a carved symbol, or a sprinkling of holy water could be seen as essential as the hoe in your hand. Historians still debate whether this was superstition or genuine faith, but to you, any scrap of hope feels worth trying. The soil clings to your hands, your fingernails black with dirt. You wipe them on your tunic, only smearing the grime deeper. You wish for gloves, but gloves are for those who can afford them. Your hands are your tools, and tools break. A little joke to lighten your misery. Modern motivational speakers love to say, "Do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life." You snort. Out here, you work every single day of your life, whether you love it or not. Spoiler alert, you don't. Hours drag by. Your stomach grumbles again, and you think longingly of lunch. More bread, maybe pottage if you're lucky. The sun climbs higher, giving some warmth, but the sweat under your tunic makes the breeze feel like knives. Your muscles ache, your back screams, and still the work continues. Occasionally, you hear a crow cawing overhead, circling lazily. You wonder if it's waiting for someone to collapse so it can feast. It's a grim thought, but not impossible. Accidents happen all the time. A twisted ankle, a broken tool, a fall in the mud. There's no doctor to patch you up. No insurance to cover lost time. A single injury could be the difference between life and starvation. And as you drive the hoe into the stubborn earth once more, you feel that reality settle deep inside you. This isn't a choice. It's survival. From dawn to dusk, the fields own you. And you're only at the beginning of your long, exhausting day. The fields may take your strength, but the Lord takes everything else. By midday, your back aches and your stomach gnaws at itself. But before you can even think about returning to your hut, you're reminded of your obligations. The reeve, the stern-faced steward who enforces the Lord's will, makes his rounds. He watches you and the other peasants like a hawk, counting, calculating, making sure that every seed sown and every sheaf gathered will ultimately benefit the manor. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow, but he scowls, his eyes narrowing. The unspoken message is clear. Work harder. The land isn't yours. It belongs to the Lord, and every bit of labor you pour into it enriches him, not you. You might get a small portion for your family, but the rest, the lion's share, vanishes into the manor storehouses. Historians still argue whether peasants were more exploited or more secure than we imagine today, since some lords were relatively generous compared to others. But generous is relative when you're scraping the bottom of survival. Taxes aren't just money. They're grain, eggs, chickens, labor. If you owe a day of service, you show up to repair his roads, mend his fences, or cut his timber. You are, quite literally, at his mercy, and mercy is in short supply. The reeve stops near a woman in the row beside you. Her bundle of weeds isn't big enough, apparently, and he raises his voice. Everyone hears. Her cheeks flush, but she works faster. Shame is a tool here, just as sharp as the blade of an axe. You keep your eyes down and your hoe moving, afraid of drawing attention. Taxes don't end in the field. Even the mill is the Lord's. If you want to grind your grain into flour, you have to use his mill, pay his fee, and endure his rules. Bake bread without milling it through his system, and you could face punishment. The same goes for ovens, forests, even rivers. Want to fish? Pay a tax. Want firewood? Pay again. It's like living in a world where every step is metered, every breath invoiced. Another quirky tidbit: Some lords demanded a merché, a fee peasants had to pay if their daughters married outside the manor. That's right, your child's marriage could cost you money. Love may be free, but in feudal society, it's taxable. You sigh and dig your hoe deeper, your stomach clenching with hunger. Soon, the midday meal is called. You trudge back to your hut with the others, each step heavy. But even as you eat, another chunk of bread, maybe some thin pottage, you know the best part of the harvest isn't yours to keep. It's already claimed. The Lord and his men will feast on roasted meats and rich pies while you gnaw crusts. One little joke. You think modern landlords are tough? Try owing grain, eggs, and half your week's labor on top of rent. Medieval peasants would laugh at your security deposit complaints. As you chew, you picture the manor house at the center of this world. Larger, sturdier, filled with things you'll never touch. Soft cushions, bright fabrics, roasted meats dripping with fat. You glimpse it sometimes from a distance, its high windows looking down at you like indifferent eyes. That's where your harvest goes. That's where your strength vanishes. You finish eating quickly. The reeve doesn't allow long breaks. Your body is sore. Your belly still hollow. But the work calls you back. Always back. The taxes and duties feel like chains, invisible but heavy. You can't see them, but you carry them with every step, every bite of bread, every drop of sweat in the fields. And as you pick up your hoe again, you wonder if you'll ever know what it feels like to work for yourself and not for someone else. But you already know the answer. The afternoon wears on, but work in the fields isn't the only burden pressing down on you. As the sun dips lower, you hear whispers spreading like smoke through the village. A neighbor passes by with her basket, muttering under her breath about strange signs and witches. Another man clutches a charm at his neck, muttering a prayer. You catch fragments of gossip, and suddenly you realize fear here is as constant as hunger. You pause, leaning on your hoe for a moment, pretending to catch your breath while your ears strain. They talk of a sick cow, a child struck with fever, a patch of crops failing. In a world without science or germ theory, every misfortune has to be explained, and the explanation often falls on the supernatural. Witches, curses, sin. Historians still argue whether accusations of witchcraft were as common in the early Middle Ages as they later became. But one thing is certain: fear of the unseen was ever present. To a peasant like you, a headache might be God's punishment, or the devil's trick, or the neighbor's evil glance. Every cough, every shadow, could be something more sinister than nature. The village priest preaches that demons prowl in the night, eager to claim weak souls. You've heard him thunder from the pulpit about women who consort with the devil, about charms that must be burned, about sin dragging the community into ruin. You nod along, because to disagree would be dangerous. But deep inside, you know this fear is part of daily life. You carry it like you carry your hunger. As you trudge back through the village, you overhear two women arguing. One insists her neighbor cursed her goat after a quarrel because the animal stopped giving milk. The other swears it was punishment from God for missing Mass. You shake your head, unsure which story is worse. Either way, someone will pay. Through gossip, through penance, maybe through punishment. A quirky tidbit: some peasants carried little bags filled with herbs or even teeth as protective charms. People believed garlic around the neck could ward off sickness, or that writing a holy verse on parchment and tucking it into your clothing could keep demons away. Think of it as the medieval version of carrying a lucky rabbit's foot. Only sometimes it was an actual rabbit's foot. Children run past you, laughing, chasing one another with sticks. But even in play, their games echo the fears of their parents. One boy calls another a witch's son, and the others laugh nervously before running on. Fear is learned early here, woven into every word, every superstition. And then comes the priest himself, walking slowly through the lane. His robe is patched, but still finer than anything you own. His wooden cross swinging against his chest. Villagers lower their heads as he passes. His authority is almost as heavy as the Lord's. He pauses to bless a child, then lifts his hand in warning. "Keep pure," he says, "or the devil will walk among you tonight." You shiver, and not just from the cold. A little joke for perspective: modern people fear Wi-Fi going out. Here, you fear literal demons sneaking into your hut at night. Talk about an upgrade in daily anxieties. You return to your hut as the shadows lengthen, your body aching, your mind uneasy. Inside, the smoke thickens again from the hearth, but the talk continues. Your spouse mentions hearing strange cries in the woods. Your neighbor swore she saw a shadow without a body near the well. Everyone has a story, and none of them end well. You try to push the fear aside, focusing instead on the rhythm of survival: eating, working, sleeping. But even as you lie on your straw bed that night, fleas nipping at your skin, you can't help but wonder: if sickness comes, if crops fail, will they blame you next? Because in this world, gossip and fear can kill as surely as hunger. You wake again in the middle of the night, scratching at your arms. The fleas never sleep. You slap at your skin, but it's useless. They live in the straw, in the seams of your tunic, even in your hair. You're never free of them. And when you stumble outside into the crisp air, you realize it's not just fleas that threaten you here. It's everything. Filth surrounds you like an invisible fog. The village lane stinks. It isn't just mud. It's manure, food scraps, and chamber pot waste tossed casually out the door. There's no sewage system, no drains, no neat garbage collection. Everything flows downhill, pooling into foul-smelling ditches. Rats scurry through the piles, their sleek bodies darting between shadows. You hear them squeak and scuttle, and your skin crawls. They're not pets here. They're carriers of sickness. Though you don't know it yet, they'll one day carry a plague that will wipe out half of Europe. You walk toward the well again, passing puddles that glisten strangely in the moonlight. A neighbor is dumping a bucket, the contents unmistakable. You wrinkle your nose. You'll drink water from that same well tomorrow, and you don't even want to think about what's seeping into it right now. Historians still argue whether medieval water was always unsafe or whether some wells were perfectly fine. But in practice, you trust ale because you've seen the well fouled too many times. Disease doesn't announce itself with labels. It sneaks in through every swallow, every bite. The sound of coughing echoes from one hut, deep, rattling, desperate. You know that sound. Everyone does. Sickness spreads like wildfire here. One child gets a fever, and within days, half the huts are whispering prayers. You tighten your cloak and hurry on, as if speed alone can protect you. Inside your hut, the smell is hardly better. The smoke clings to everything, burning your eyes and throat. The floor is dirt, the corners dark with damp. You shift your straw, trying to find a patch that's less alive with vermin. But there's no relief. Your skin tingles, and you realize you're scratching again before you even notice. A quirky tidbit. Some peasants believed carrying dried toad bones could protect them from illness. Others smeared their skin with mixtures of herbs, garlic, or even dung, hoping to ward off bad humors. Imagine rubbing cow dung on yourself as medicine. Today, it would get you banned from every pharmacy, but back then, it was survival by superstition. The priest warns that illness comes from sin, from God's wrath. You nod, but you're not convinced. You've seen good people die just as quickly as the wicked. You've seen strong men brought down by a cough, children buried before they grew their adult teeth. Deep down, you know it's not sin. It's the filth. But you don't dare say it aloud. And then there are the lice. They're in your hair, in your clothes, tiny little vampires that never stop feeding. You scratch until you bleed, but they don't leave. Everyone has them. There's no shame, just discomfort. Sometimes you burn your clothing seams with a candle to kill the eggs, but the relief never lasts. One joke for you. Modern people panic if they see one cockroach in their kitchen. You'd trade every rat, flea, and louse in your hut for that one cockroach. You curl up again on the straw, pulling your cloak tight. The air is damp, the smell unbearable, the itch constant. Sleep is no escape, only a pause before another day of the same filth. And you know this truth. In the Middle Ages, sickness doesn't just lurk in shadows. It lives with you, in every bite, every breath, every scratch of your skin. And tomorrow, it might claim you too. The bell tolls before dawn breaks, deep and heavy, rolling across the fields like thunder. It's not just a sound. It's your schedule, your alarm clock, your reminder that the day belongs not to you, but to the rhythm of the church. You pause, wipe mud from your hands, and cross yourself, partly from faith, partly from fear. In the Middle Ages, the church bell rules more firmly than any clock tower or calendar ever will. You shuffle with the others along the muddy lane toward the parish church. It rises above the huts like a gray guardian, its stone tower crooked but proud. Inside, it's dim and cold, the air scented with smoke and damp wool. Candles flicker in little pools of light, but shadows rule most corners. You stand because there are few benches, and those are for elders or wealthier villagers. Your feet ache already, but you bow your head when the priest lifts his arms, because everyone else does, and because you fear what might happen if you don't. The Latin service washes over you like rain. You don't understand much, just scraps of words here and there, but the pattern is familiar. Kneel, stand, bow, repeat. Historians still argue whether ordinary peasants understood the meaning of the Mass, but you don't need the translation. You know when to murmur, Amen. You know when to whisper your private prayers for food, health, or mercy. The church doesn't just feed your soul, it shapes your hours, your seasons, even your harvest. One mainstream fact: every peasant owes a tithe, 1/10 of all produce or earnings, to the church. It doesn't matter if your cupboard is empty or your family is hungry. The tithe comes first. Coins are rare, so you give grain, eggs, or a measure of beans. You eye the tithe barn near the churchyard, its doors bulging with food, and you feel both resentment and resignation. Sometimes, though, there are moments of light. On feast days, banners flap in the wind, villagers sing, and you might even taste sweet pancakes on Shrovetide before Lent strips the table bare again. There are mystery plays too, noisy spectacles acted out on wagons, where saints and devils strut for laughs and lessons. A devil in red tights makes children scream and adults chuckle. Yes, it's medieval theater, budget version, but it's a break from endless toil, a quirky tidbit. Once a year, during rogation days, the priest and villagers beat the bounds of the parish. They walk the edges of the fields, chanting litanies and tapping stones or trees with sticks so children will remember the borders. Some boys get swatted too, not out of cruelty, but as a way of imprinting the landmarks. Generations later, men still swear they can feel the spot on their backs where the parish line runs. Still, fear is never far. The doom painting above the chancel arch reminds you of Judgment Day. Christ in glory, souls weighed, devils dragging the wicked to flames. You crane your neck upward, uneasy. Heaven or hell, sheep or goats. The painting makes it clear which side you want to end up on. You cross yourself again, whispering a prayer just in case. And here's a small joke to lighten your dread. Modern people complain about subscription fees for streaming shows. In your life, the tithe is the original subscription, and you can't cancel, even if you don't like the service. When the bells ring again at noon, you bow your head in the fields, mutter a quick prayer, and return to your hoe. Work never pauses, but prayer overlays it like a second heartbeat. The day is divided into slices: work, prayer, hunger, sleep, all bound together by the bell. And as the sun dips and the evening bell tolls, you realize this truth. Faith doesn't just shape your soul. It owns your time, your food, your fears, your very breath. By the time the church bell fades into silence, the village lane is stirring with something unusual. A small caravan has appeared at the edge of the fields, 2 wagons creaking under bundles, a couple of donkeys laden with sacks, and men shouting in accents that sound strange to your ear. Traveling merchants. They're rare enough to make the children sprint ahead, eyes wide, as if the wagons themselves are magical beasts. You wipe your brow with a dirty sleeve, curiosity pulling you closer. The wagons are covered with rough cloth, tied down with ropes, and when the merchants pull them back, your breath catches. Bright-colored fabrics, reds, blues, even a strip of shimmering green, spill out like treasure. You've never seen dyes this rich before, except maybe in a saint's robe on feast day. For a moment, the dull brown of your tunic feels heavier than ever. Historians still argue how much access peasants really had to exotic goods. But in moments like this, you see proof that the wider world does exist beyond your muddy lane. The merchants carry things you can't dream of affording: glass beads, salt crystals shining like ice, tiny pewter trinkets shaped like crosses. To you, they might as well be relics from another planet. The crowd gathers quickly, drawn by wonder and suspicion in equal measure. Your neighbor whispers, "Strangers bring trouble," while her daughter tugs her sleeve, begging for a ribbon. You hear the Reeve muttering to himself, already calculating whether the Lord's tax should skim from this trade too. Suspicion is never far from curiosity. You edge closer to one of the wagons. A merchant notices your stare and grins, holding up a pouch. "Pepper," he says, pinching the air for emphasis. Pepper. You've heard of it. A spice worth its weight in silver, the taste of kings. You imagine sprinkling it on your bland bread porridge, your dull cabbage stew, and your mouth waters. Of course, you can't afford it. You could trade maybe a few eggs, but he'd laugh. Pepper is for nobles, not for you. Not. Still, you linger. He gestures to a stack of knives with smoother blades than your rusted one, to wool cloth softer than the coarse sackcloth on your shoulders. Each item glimmers with possibility. Better meals, warmer nights, easier work. But each one also costs more than you have. The merchants know this. They wink, cajole, tempt. And you, like most of the crowd, mostly watch. A quirky tidbit. Some merchants carried not just goods, but stories. Tales of distant cities, of seas filled with ships, of strange creatures seen in foreign lands. A man once swore he had seen a fish as large as a cottage, with teeth longer than a man's arm. True? Probably not. But in a village with no books and little news, a wild story is worth almost as much as pepper. The priest arrives, of course, eyeing the merchants with that careful blend of welcome and suspicion. He blesses the wagons with a sign of the cross, but warns the villagers not to be tempted into sin by foreign luxuries. You nod along, but you can't stop staring at that green cloth, glowing like a forest after rain. One little joke. Modern folks browse online stores they can't afford. You stare at wagons full of wonders you'll never own. Different centuries, same window shopping. As the sun dips lower, the merchants light small torches, their flames bright against the gathering dusk. Villagers haggle for salt, for cheap trinkets, for whatever scraps they can afford. You walk home empty-handed, your hands rough, your stomach hollow. The excitement fades, leaving behind the same mud, the same fields, the same bread. But for one shimmering moment, you felt a world beyond this village. And that reminder that life might be bigger somewhere else burns almost as sharply as hunger. By morning, the excitement of the traveling merchants has faded, and routine returns like an unwelcome guest. But today, there is a summons to the village square. A crime, or at least what passes for one here, has been committed, and justice must be seen. You join the trickle of villagers walking toward the open patch of ground near the market cross, curiosity pulling you as much as duty. The square is crowded. People gather not because they relish misery, though some clearly do, but because punishment is entertainment. With no theaters, no printed books, no football matches. The manorial court is as much spectacle as it is law. You stand shoulder to shoulder with neighbors, shifting from foot to foot in the cold, waiting to see who has fallen afoul of the system this time. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers saw these courts as oppressive tools of the Lord or as genuine keepers of order. What you see today is both. The reeve stands near the Lord's steward, a roll of parchment in hand. Names are read, accusations spoken. One man is accused of stealing firewood from the manor forest. Another is accused of letting his pigs trample a neighbor's garden. A woman is charged with selling ale that was too weak. You bite your tongue. Your own ale often tastes like ditch water, but here, ale is regulated by law under the assize of bread and ale. The Lord demands standards, not for your comfort, but to ensure taxes flow smoothly. The first man steps forward. He protests his innocence, swearing the fallen wood he gathered was free for all. The steward frowns. The villagers murmur. Judgment comes swiftly. He must pay a fine, a handful of pennies he likely doesn't have. Without coins, he may owe grain or labor instead. The crowd nods. Justice served, whether fair or not. Next comes the woman with the ale. She insists she brewed, as always, but the reeve holds up a wooden measure, claiming it fell short. Her punishment? The stocks. Wooden beams clamp her wrists and ankles, leaving her seated and exposed. Children throw clumps of mud while adults smirk. It's not death, but it's humiliation, just as effective in a small village where reputation means survival. A quirky tidbit: in some places, even animals faced trial. Pigs accused of biting children were sometimes hauled before courts, defended by appointed lawyers, and sentenced to hanging or exile. Imagine standing in the square watching a pig in a noose. It sounds absurd today, but to medieval minds, justice applied to all creatures. Then comes a theft charge. Grain stolen from the tithe barn. The accused is pale, trembling. This is no small matter. Grain belongs to the church, and stealing it is both a crime and a sin. The steward announces the sentence: flogging. The whip cracks, and the crowd flinches, even if most pretend not to. Your stomach twists, but you force your eyes away. To live here is to accept harshness as normal. One little joke for perspective. Modern people get community service picking up litter. You get community service being pelted with rotten turnips in the stocks. Not exactly the kind of resume booster you'd brag about on LinkedIn. You shuffle uncomfortably as the punishments continue. There are no long trials here, no lawyers and powdered wigs. Justice is quick, public, and meant to scare. The Fourth Lateran Council of 1215 outlawed trials by ordeal. No more clutching hot iron or plunging hands into boiling water to prove innocence. But the shift to juries hasn't reached every corner. And even when it does, those juries are usually just neighbors, pressured to keep the peace by siding with the Lord's steward. The square begins to thin out after the last case. Some villagers gossip excitedly. Others shake their heads. A few look uneasy. You walk away heavy-hearted. Punishment isn't meant only for the guilty. It's a reminder to everyone else that the line is thin, and stepping over it can mean ruin. As you pass the stocks, you glance quickly at the ale cellar. Mud cakes her hair. Children still jeer, but her eyes are sharp with fury. You wonder if she'll survive the shame. In a place where survival depends on community, humiliation can be as deadly as hunger. And as you trudge back toward the fields, you feel the weight of it all. The Lord's taxes, the church's demands, and now, the square's punishments. The law is not protection here, it is another chain. The days grow shorter, the air sharper. You feel it in your bones before you see it in the fields. Winter has arrived. The ground hardens under frost. The trees stand bare, and the thin smoke curling from every hut looks more like desperation than warmth. Hunger is no longer a shadow. It is a guest that sits openly at your table. You wake one morning to find the last turnip shriveled, the bread loaf down to its final crust, and the pottage pot empty. The harvest months are long gone, and whatever little grain you saved has already been claimed by the tithe or eaten by rats. You sit at the rickety table, stomach growling, and realize this simple truth. You must stretch what little you have through months of cold and darkness. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants really starved every winter or whether they managed to scrape by with planning. But you don't need academic debate. You can feel your ribs pressing against your skin. Malnutrition is as constant as the frost on your doorway. Lunch, or what passes for it, might be nothing more than watery gruel. Dinner might be bread so stale you need to soak it in ale to swallow. Meat is a dream, a ghost in your imagination. You think back to that single feast day when you tasted pork and your mouth waters. That memory alone keeps you trudging forward. A quirky tidbit. Some villagers made pottage so thin it was nicknamed thin gruel by later writers. Sometimes it was flavored with whatever herbs you could gather, even nettles or weeds from the hedgerow. You chew and swallow, telling yourself it's medicine, not weeds, though your stomach knows the difference. The cold makes everything worse. You shiver constantly, pulling your rough cloak tighter. But wool can only do so much when dampness seeps into every seam. You huddle near the hearth, feeding it scraps of wood, dung, or straw, anything that burns. The smoke fills the hut, coating your lungs and making your eyes water, yet without it, you'd freeze. Children cry more often now. Their thin bodies shake under ragged blankets, their cheeks hollow. A neighbor's child dies suddenly, and the whispered cause is winter hunger. You lower your head, saying nothing. There's no comfort to offer. In this world, death is never far, especially in the hungry months. One little joke to keep your spirits alive. Modern people whine if their fridge looks empty on a Friday night. You laugh bitterly. What's a fridge? You'd kill for just one shelf of their leftovers. As the snow settles over the fields, you notice the silence. No more clatter of hoes. No more gossip in the lanes. Work in the fields pauses, but not because you rest, because the earth itself is locked tight. You turn instead to mending tools, patching clothes, or twisting straw into rope. Survival is work. Even when the fields sleep, hunger dulls your senses. Your body aches more. Your skin cracks. Your thoughts slow. You wonder if spring will ever come. You wonder if you will live to see green shoots again. And when you finally fall asleep on your straw bed, your dreams are filled with visions of bread, of meat, of warmth you cannot touch. Winter is no season here. Winter is a test, and too many fail. By late winter, when the days still crawl with frost, your body is already battered. Work doesn't stop just because the earth is frozen. You still haul wood, carry water, mend fences, tend animals. And with every task comes the same quiet truth. Your body is your only tool, and it breaks easily. It happens suddenly. You're chopping a small pile of firewood, the axe head wobbling on its loose handle. You swing, miss slightly, and the blade glances into your shin. It's only a shallow cut, but blood seeps into your woolen hose. You press your hand against it, thinking little of it at first. But hours later, the wound burns. By the next morning, it swells and throbs, red creeping across the skin. There are no doctors here, no antiseptic, no bandages in neat wrappers. You have herbs, maybe garlic, maybe a smear of honey if you're lucky. Old remedies passed from neighbor to neighbor. Historians still argue how effective these folk cures were, but in your hut, it's all you have. You wrap the wound with a dirty strip of cloth and hope God intervenes. Infections are merciless. A scratch from a tool, a bite from a dog, even a splinter left too long can turn deadly. You've seen it happen. A man lost half his hand to rot. A woman died after childbirth, her fever rising while the priest muttered prayers that could not lower it. Death isn't always dramatic here. Sometimes it slips in quietly, through a cut no larger than a fingernail. A quirky tidbit: some healers carried dried frog skins or powdered bones as charms against infection. Others believed a poultice of spider webs could close wounds. You look at the cobwebs in your hut and wonder if you should try it. Anything is better than waiting for the fever. Your family watches you nervously. If you can't work, the field suffers. If the field suffers, you all go hungry. A single injury can drag an entire household toward ruin. You feel their eyes on you, not unkind, but anxious. They need you in the fields, hoe in hand, back bent, sweat pouring. But your leg aches with every step, forcing you to limp. And then comes the reeve. He doesn't care about your wound. He only sees a man not pulling his weight. His gaze is sharp, his words cutting. The Lord expects his labor. You bow your head, biting back pain, and promise you'll be there tomorrow. One little joke, if you can stomach it. Modern people say, I cut myself cooking, better run to urgent care. You cut yourself here, and urgent care is your neighbor with a rusty needle and some goose grease. Good luck. The fever doesn't come this time. God spares you. Or maybe the honey worked. Or maybe your body just fought harder. But you've learned the lesson. Every tool, every step, every chore carries risk. You live in a world where your health is fragile, where medicine is hope, and where one wrong swing could end more than your workday. And as you limp back to the field days later, still aching, you know this. Survival in the Middle Ages doesn't require just labor. It demands luck. And luck is a gift you can't earn. The frost is loosening now. The fields softening beneath the weak sun. But the hunger and injuries linger. Then, in the corner of the village square, you hear a murmur, rebellion. It starts as whispers between tired men, travels through gossiping women at the well, and finally reaches your own ears as you carry a bucket. The talk is dangerous. Someone mutters that peasants in another shire refused their lord's taxes. Someone else swears they've heard of whole villages rising together, torches in hand, demanding lower rents and fairer treatment. You glance around nervously. Even hearing these words feels like treason. Historians still argue whether the great uprisings, like the famous Peasants' Revolt of 1381, were planned revolutions or sudden bursts of desperation. What you feel now is closer to desperation. Every winter strips you to the bone, every tithe barn swallows your food, and every steward sneers at your pain. Hope is rare, but so is silence when tempers boil. A neighbor grips your arm tightly. They say the king will listen, he whispers. They say the lords have bled us too long. His eyes shine, but you see fear beneath, because rebellion promises not just freedom, but death. Punishment for rebels is swift and merciless. You've heard of men hanged, drawn, and quartered for less. Still, the seed is planted. That night, as you huddle by the hearth, the conversation drifts again. Your spouse shakes their head, warning against foolishness. But another voice, an older cousin perhaps, says, "What have we left to lose?" The room falls silent, except for the crackle of the fire and the rumble of your stomach. A quirky tidbit: sometimes rebellion didn't even begin with speeches or banners. It began with something small: tearing down a fence, refusing to pay a penny, or mocking the reeve. One act of defiance that spread like wildfire. And once it spread, it was hard to smother. You remember the square, the punishments, the stocks. You remember the merchants with their bright fabrics, proof that a bigger world exists. And you wonder, why are you chained here when others wander free? One little joke to soften the tension: modern protests hand out flyers and chant slogans. Here, your flyer is just a whispered rumor, and your slogan is probably "Down with the Lord," shouted right before the soldiers arrive. The next day, the reeve seems sharper, sterner. Maybe he's heard the whispers too. His eyes linger longer, his scowl deeper. You bow your head and grip your hoe tighter, pretending not to think about rebellion, pretending not to imagine what it would feel like to finally say no. But in your heart, the idea won't leave. Like a spark smoldering in dry straw, it waits. And you realize, with a strange mixture of fear and excitement, that rebellion isn't just talk anymore, it's an option. The rumor of rebellion still hums in your ears when you hear the clatter of hooves. You look up from the furrow you're turning and see them. A small party of mounted men, armor glinting, cloaks snapping in the wind. At their head rides a knight. His horse is massive, taller than you by half, its breath steaming in the cold air. The knight's mail gleams beneath his surcoat, his sword resting at his side, a symbol as much as a weapon. The villagers freeze, hoes and baskets forgotten. You bow your head automatically. To meet a knight's eyes too boldly feels dangerous, like staring into the sun. His very presence reminds you of your place. Low, small, insignificant. Historians still argue how often ordinary peasants encountered knights, but when they appear, the difference in station is undeniable. His cloak is dyed a deep red, richer than anything you've seen outside the church. His boots are leather, clean and strong, while yours are cracked and soaked through. You are mud, he is metal and silk. The reeve hurries forward, bowing so deeply he almost folds in half. The knight speaks briefly, his voice calm but commanding. You can't hear the words, but you can guess. Orders from the manor, perhaps about taxes, labor, or patrols. His gestures are sharp, practiced. He doesn't need to shout. Authority radiates from every movement. A quirky tidbit: some knights were bound by the chivalric code, swearing to protect the weak, honor women, and serve God. But peasants often joked quietly that knights protected little besides their own purses. Chivalry might sound noble in songs, but in muddy villages like yours, it's often invisible. The children peek from behind their mothers' skirts, staring wide-eyed at the shining armor. To them, the knight looks like a figure from a storybook. To you, he looks like the man who could trample your crops with one gallop and never pay for the damage. He dismounts briefly, speaking with the reeve, then turns to survey the fields. His gaze passes over you. For a moment, you feel small as an ant beneath a boot. Does he see your hunger, your blisters, your patched tunic? Or are you simply part of the landscape, no more important than the mud? One little joke to ease your nerves. Modern people complain about their bosses dropping by the office. In your world, management visit means a man on horseback with a sword. Good luck with that performance review. When the knight finally turns away, climbing back into the saddle, relief spreads through the villagers like a sigh. The horses clatter down the lane, and life stirs again. But the weight of their presence lingers. You feel it in your chest. That reminder that the line between you and them is wider than oceans. And as you bend once more to the soil, you realize nobility isn't just wealth or armor, it's power. And power ensures you'll always be looking up from the mud. Night falls heavy, like a cloak soaked in ink. The last glow of the sun bleeds away behind the trees, and with it goes whatever small sense of safety daylight offered. You trudge back to your hut, your legs aching, your belly aching more. The path is little more than mud and shadow, and every sound makes you turn your head. The snap of a twig, the rustle of dry grass, the hoot of an owl. Inside, the fire is a faint red smear, barely alive. You huddle near it, wrapping your cloak around yourself, but the cold creeps in from every crack in the walls. Smoke curls upward and sits stubbornly near the rafters, burning your eyes. The children whimper, the dog growls at nothing. Night here is not rest, it's trial. The howling starts soon after. Wolves prowl the forests around the village, their voices long and mournful. They are hungriest in winter, and bold enough to skirt close to the huts. You picture their yellow eyes gleaming in the dark, teeth flashing, fur bristling. The dog barks louder, then tucks its tail between its legs. You draw the blanket tighter, whispering a prayer. Historians still argue how common wolf attacks truly were. But in the peasant imagination, wolves were terror itself, second only to demons. As the fire dims, shadows swell in the corners. You try to sleep, but your ears strain against the silence between howls. Every creak of timber, every whisper of wind feels like something moving. You remember the priest's warning. The devil roams at night. You close your eyes, but the image of clawed hands reaching for you makes them snap open again. And there are threats more human than beast. Thieves, too, wander under cover of dark. With food so scarce, a stolen loaf or chicken can mean survival for one family and ruin for another. Locks? Rare. Doors are little more than wooden planks barred with a stick. If someone wanted to break in, they could. You sleep with your knife close, dull as it is, hoping you never have to use it. A quirky tidbit: some villagers hung protective charms over their doors at night. Sprigs of herbs, carved symbols, even horse skulls set on posts near fields to ward off evil. To modern eyes, it looks eerie, but to them, it was a shield against both wolves and witches. One little joke: modern people fear missing Wi-Fi for a night. You fear wolves, demons, and starving neighbors breaking through your door. Not exactly the same nighttime stress. You toss on your straw bed, fleas biting, smoke stinging, cold gnawing at your toes. The sounds outside seem louder now. The crunch of snow, the flap of wings, the low murmur of voices. Are they men? Spirits? You don't dare check. You just press your eyes shut and hope dawn comes quickly. Sleep finally drags you under, but it's not peace. Dreams twist into nightmares of wolves with human faces, of nights dragging you in chains, of fields that grow nothing but bones. You wake before dawn, heart racing, sweat cold on your skin, and as the bell tolls faintly in the distance, you realize night is not a time of rest here. Night is a battle you must survive until the sun returns. Dawn bleeds back into the sky, pale and gray, and you wake from a restless night with every muscle aching. Your body is still tired, your belly still empty, and the fleas have left their tiny red signatures all over your skin. You drag yourself from the straw bed, your cloak heavy with damp, and you know before you even step outside what awaits you. The fields, the mud, the hunger, again. This is the truth of a peasant's life. Every day looks like the one before it, and every tomorrow promises the same cycle. Work, hunger, prayer, fear, sleep, repeat. There's no sense of progress, no ladder to climb, no retirement plan waiting decades ahead. You work until you can't, and when you can't, you fade. You step outside into the chill. The smoke from neighbors' huts curls upward just as it did yesterday, and will tomorrow. Children cry, dogs bark, roosters crow. It is the same music every morning. You tighten your cloak and trudge to the fields, your stomach hollow already. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants saw themselves as trapped or simply accepted their lives as God's will. To you, it doesn't feel like choice. It feels like survival. And survival doesn't give space for dreams. The soil resists your hoe. Your back protests each bend. Your hands blister anew. You've already lived this day. You'll live it again. The Lord will demand. The church will take. The reeve will watch. Wolves will howl at night. Gossip will poison the air. And hunger will gnaw at your bones. It is not one bad day. It is every day. A quirky tidbit: in many villages, the same strip of land was farmed by families for generations, passed down like a burden. Your grandfather sweated here, your father sweated here, and you do the same. Legacy, in this world, isn't freedom. It's repetition. One little joke to ease your sigh: modern people complain about Monday blues. For you, every day is Monday, and there's no weekend. As the bell tolls again in the distance, you pause, leaning on your hoe. You glance at the horizon, gray and endless. Hope flickers, faint, fragile. Maybe spring will bring a better harvest. Maybe rebellion will change things. Maybe not. You wipe sweat from your brow, grip the hoe tighter, and bend once more to the earth. The cycle continues. The struggle doesn't end. And if you somehow survive today, tomorrow will look exactly the same. The Middle Ages doesn't want you to thrive. It only dares you to endure. But now, as you lie back in your modern bed, safe and warm, let's soften the edges of this story. The peasant's world was harsh, yes, muddy huts, endless labor, hunger, always at the door. Yet there was also rhythm, a kind of strange steadiness in that repetition. The bell marked their hours, the seasons marked their years, and the village moved together like a single heartbeat. Close your eyes and imagine the flicker of a hearth, not choking smoke, but a gentle glow. Feel the weight of the cloak around your shoulders, no longer damp, but warm and comforting. The wolves are far away now, their howls softened into the lull of distant wind. The reeve isn't watching, the Lord isn't calling, and no one is demanding your grain. Instead, you hear the faint trickle of water from the well, steady and calm. You smell bread, fresh, warm, soft. Nothing like the hard crusts of the peasant's table. And for once, there is enough. Enough warmth, enough food, enough peace. Your breath slows. The rhythm of work and hunger fades, replaced by the rhythm of rest. Inhale deeply. Let the weight of the day dissolve, and exhale into stillness. The peasants lived in a world of repetition. You live in a world where you can choose to let go, just for tonight. So allow yourself this moment. The bell is silent, the fields can wait, and the night is yours. Drift softly into sleep, carrying not the mud or the fear, but only the calm after the story.